So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Hunters Hill Library Community Engagement Session, our first one of what will no doubt be many as we move through this journey over sort of the next 6 months. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the Wallumadagul of the Eora Nation on the land on which we're having this session tonight. I'd like to pay respect to elders, past, present and emerging, and any Torres Strait or Aboriginal people who may be here at this meeting tonight. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to our Acting General Manager, Mr Nick Tobin, and Nick will just say a few words and introduce Lee Hillam from Dunhillam. Thank you.
Thanks, Annie, and it's a real pleasure to be here tonight. I'm Council's Acting General Manager. I've been in the chair for about 5 weeks, but I was Acting General Manager about 3.5 years ago. For 9 months, and this project sort of kicked off a bit then, and so it's now nice to see that we're starting to move it forward again. I'm a big believer in libraries. I built probably the biggest library on the North Shore at Chatswood, 5,000 square metre library that's now probably a bit small, but they're really great things. They're great for the community, great for young people, great for all people, and I think it's really exciting that Hunters Hill's starting to now look towards getting its own library service into the future. Firstly, I'd just like to welcome our architects here tonight, Lee and Georgia, who will take over in a moment, and from Dunhillam, and also welcome Councillor Williams, who's here with us. I don't think I saw any other councillors. If I did, I apologise. Any hands? No? All good. Thank you. To the staff here tonight, Annie, Jade and Gabby, thank you for all your efforts to put this together and to get everyone along. And just a reminder, we are videoing tonight's event, and so if you don't want your photo taken, just keep looking forward, probably is the easiest thing. You must get your back of your head in it. Tonight's all about, it's a step in the process. It's about building up a brief for our library going forward. And so there'll be a bit of information given out, but it's all about getting feedback from you guys and also then being able to collate that and bring it back to you in a form that we'll talk about at the end of tonight's session. So I'm going to say no more and ask the architects to come over, and they're going to run the session. So thank you.
Hi everyone. Thank for having me here and welcoming me back. I don't know if any of you were here helping me do this similar project for Henley Precinct. Does anyone? Yes. Thank you so much for, your commitment to your community and for participating in this way. It's really important that that we can talk to you directly, so we really appreciate it. Like Nick said, we're really early in the process here. This is the first step. We've done, as architects, we've done no work except for collect information. So we're here to show you some of the information that we've collected and to ask for your feedback on it, and then to draw more information out of you. So you are, if I'm not making it clear, you're here to work, and we'll be making sure that your homework is handed in at the end. Some of you do know who we are because you worked with us before, but we're a practice. This is, on our website, and you can look into the kind of work that we do at your own leisure. But one of the things that's important for me to point out all the time is that we are what's called a B Corp, and a B Corp means that we're a benefit corporation. We work for people, for the benefit of all people. We work for the benefit of the planet, and we do make profit in order to support those two things. So we're not a not-for-profit organisation, but neither are we a straightforward profit organisation. And this is the kind of work we like to do and that we do a lot of because we like working for the wider community. So tonight, it's a fairly straightforward format. We're just going to take you through, like I said, some of the things that we have learnt about the site. We want to talk to you a little bit about what libraries have been and what they can be, and get you a little bit fired up about what your library might be in the future. We've got some, like I mentioned, some homework for you to do, some workshop activities for you to do in your groups on the table, and we'll come around and help you with that, but we'll explain what we want you to do there, and then there'll be plenty of time for you to ask any questions. So, starting out, I mean, libraries, we're all very familiar with libraries, but it's good to recap where they came from. Libraries originally were they were status symbols for wealthy people. When they became communal facilities, they were, because books were still a very expensive, very, fairly rare piece. So this library, which is, a very beautiful library from the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, shows you a kind of what that library tradition was. It was a storage receptacle for books. Full stop. Now, we all know that libraries are much more than that today. I mean, this is Marrickville Library, which is one of Sydney's more recent libraries, but also one that really, at the time, even though it's now 3 or 4 years old, stretched the boundaries of what a community library can and I think should be. And this is the kind of thing that we want you to think about, not necessarily what a library was that you've seen in the past, but really what the library in Hunters Hill can be. And it might be any number of things that you can choose to put into this library, and we will consider that. So another thing that libraries have become is that as a lot of civic kind of facilities become consolidated into the library, you might go and you can pay your rates or pay a bill in a library now. They're also becoming what people call resilience centres. So they're places where, like for example, in the bushfires of 2019-2020, libraries were the source of information for a lot of the local communities. They were the place that could be trusted for people to get the information they needed about what was going on in their community when everything else was going down. So a lot of libraries have sort of taken on this role as a sort of a trusted source and a community resilience centre, really a place that you can go to find out what you need about what's going on in any kind of natural disaster. Now, I don't think Hunters Hill is likely in the line of, big bushfires, but you could, for example, have a whole of suburb power outage. And in that case, you would want your library to be the one place that did have power. They're also becoming heat refuges. So for people who can't afford to keep their air conditioning going in a really hot day, the library is a cool place. So this is one of the ways which libraries are being stretched. We just collected together a few examples of libraries. You can see that I wonder if this is a pointer. No, it's not, sorry. You can see that there's, auditorium-like spaces. There's just literally hangout spaces. There's libraries that we've done. One of the first libraries we did, we put a full oven in because there was a group that would meet in the library every 2 weeks and they would bake cakes. The old library, for whatever quirky reason, had an oven, and they wanted to continue this. So this is where I'm talking to you about what can be specific about this place, and this is why you're here, because I can design a library. I've done plenty of them, but I can't design a library for Hunters Hill without you. So you need to tell me all of those quirky things that this library needs. So we know that the site that's being proposed at the moment is on the edge of Fig Tree Park, and you can see in terms of this overall map where some other of your community facilities are located. We think it's a good location in terms of being close to that little cluster of shops and close to a bus stop. And the Fig Tree Park is a beautiful, beautiful little park. Coming in closer to look at that site, you know that there's a number of buildings on the site there at the moment, including the Sydney Community Services and the Croquet Club. And the park, everything outside that area has just recently been renovated and upgraded. Now that site that's marked in red here is not the site, not the footprint of a building under any circumstances. That is just the area that wasn't upgraded in the Fig Tree Park upgrades. Now, State Library have this fantastic kind of ready reckoner on their website where you can punch in the population that you want to build a library for, and it'll tell you how big the library needs to be. It's a pretty dumb tool, but it's a really useful one. We did that, and for 14,000 people, which is the entire population of your council area, we need a library of 1,090 square metres, and keeping in mind that's the library functions. So bit over 1,000 square metres. Right now you have the yarn. To put this in context, the yarn is 140 square metres. So to have a library that's to have a library that is, what the state library thinks is what your population needs, will be 6 times bigger than the yarn as a minimum. The current functions, if we add up how much space the houses and the croquet club have inside them, and I'm only giving you this so you can kind of get in your head a comparison, is about 700 square metres. So if we were to say, by some miracle, take over all those buildings and make them into a library, which of course would be a very dysfunctional library, we still wouldn't have enough space. The other thing to know about this site is that there's a height restriction on the site which is 11 metres, which you might think, and you can see in the shops, means 3 stories. But in a public building, it really only means 2 stories, because you want a much higher ceiling height in a public building like a library. So your ground floor where your library would be 5 or 6 metres high, and then you could have one other story above. We wouldn't have the space to do a 3-story building, and we wouldn't, if that's, we wouldn't have the space even to kind of challenge that height limit. So a sensible building with a library on the ground floor and some other functions, community functions, probably on the next floor, might end up being about 9.5, 10 metres. It's not going to breach that height. Now, we've talked about libraries. We know that we're here to talk to you about a library, but we're also here to talk to you about the possibility of what else it could be. So and this is what we've been asked to do, is to talk about all of those possibilities. Right now, we've got two other functions that happen on that site, being the Sydney Community Services and the Croquet Club Hall. Then we've got potentially up for discussion right now with you the idea that we might include some other spaces that could have the potential to bring in a small bit of income for the council and make the whole site a little bit more sustainable. So possibly leasable office spaces, a cafe that's leased out, and residential accommodation. You can't have all of those, just by the way, before anyone gets too excited. You won't fit all of those, but this is some options. So what we have to try and do is, after talking to you about what ideas you want us to incorporate into this kind of integrated building that's a library but more, is how do we get those to all work together? How can we, what spaces could be overlapped and shared? How could they actually support one another in, the Sydney Community Services really would be quite a good match to be beside or integrated with a library, but perhaps some other functions wouldn't be. So we need to work out what works well together and what doesn't. And so the last question, what are the clashes? What are the potential clashes? What wouldn't fit? What wouldn't match that set? Now this is where you've seen this on your tables already. These are just some of our ideas of what would go with under each of those headings. And you can already see there's sort of some that would cross over. So if you look at the library, there's... Oh, sorry, I meant to move that other way, and now I'm doing everything backwards. These spaces that are here listed under the library, most of those you would have seen before in the library if you're visitors to libraries. And actually I should ask, who here is a regular library user? Yeah, that's pretty good. And what about the yarn? Is anyone a regular user of the yarn? Okay. No, okay. All right, so we've got some experienced library users here, that's good. Now, you can see here that books, of course, book borrowing is in there, and this is in no order, please don't think there's a hierarchy to that list. Lectures and talks, study spaces, they are hugely important social spaces for teenagers. Let me tell you, having teenage children myself, and if your kid's telling you they're going to the library, they probably are going to the library. I don't know how much study's going on though, okay, so that's okay, they're in the library. Research, a lot of early learning. You know, when you're a parent with young kids, you're often in the library doing rhyme time. Community meetings, a lot of have bookable rooms that you can book for your own purpose, or another common use is sort of co-working space or business incubator. So with people having their own businesses that they're working from home, they'll often use a meeting room in the library for their meetings with their clients because they don't want them in the kitchen. So the libraries are becoming really important there as well. Then, you know, the leasable space, I mean, it's anything you can dream up, really. But we've given you a few ideas of the kind of things, you know. The local solicitor might, you know, be someone that would be happy to have an office above or beside a library. Allied health, meaning, you know, physiotherapists or speech pathologists. Co-working again, but in a business sense, that there's a co-working business. And we put in apartments because everyone's talking about housing in Sydney right now, so we thought we should talk about it as well. But, you know, does the council or the community want to support putting, you know, a small number of apartments in this development? So, okay, we got the feedback on that one. Now, community services, that's what we think they're doing at the moment. So all of those possibilities are on the cards. The community, what goes on in the Croquet Club, and I'm sure we've missed things, that more would be going on in there than we know about, and that's why you'll see on your table you've got some blanks. And then what else? What else can you dream up? So this is what we need you to do. Some of the things that we have been thinking about as architects is that if we had all of those spaces together in one building, is it possible for them all to come in and out the same front door? Can they all share a foyer? If we had a multi-purpose room or hall, would we want that to be shared across all of the functions that we put into this building? And where are we going to find some clashes and problems with that? And straight away you think, okay, if we had leasable space in apartments, perhaps they'd need their own entry. So you know, this is when I tell you we're not doing any design yet. We're just thinking through what are going to be the issues and the problems that we might encounter. So when you're thinking about what you think can be in and out of this project, think about that too. Sometimes it's really, it's helpful to think, okay, are these people going to be happy coming in and out the same front door? And if they're not, it's fine, we can provide another door, but sometimes you just think they're not even going to want to be on the same site. You're not even going to want them on the same site. Now, and as far as space goes, I already said the library, about 1,000 square metres. Other spaces that we might use, we know Sydney Community Services need 600 to 800 square metres, and some of these numbers are very loose right now because, as you can imagine, once we start overlapping them, we might be able to either provide more space for other things or reduce some of the numbers. Then a community hall, you know, sort of something of this size, about 300 square metres, and leasable space. I've just put like that number really came out of nowhere, 400 to 800 square metres. Mainly that is because you wouldn't want the leasable space to be the primary dominant thing. So you want it, I think you could imagine up to about that much space in a building like this without it sort of suddenly feeling like a block of offices with a library attached to the side of it. We want the library to be the main thing. Now, thinking about the height, I kind of described this to you before, but the height, these just diagrams over there on the right are just showing how you'd want about 6 metres for a library or a community hall, and then you might do leasable space or community services functions above that, which means, you know, you've got, and that top black line represents the height limit, then, you know, but there's other ways to kind of what an architect would say to block and stack this. And you can, if you take some of the spaces that don't need such high ceiling heights, you could possibly get a 3-storey component to the building. Now, what we've learnt about, we're gathering information about the site. We don't have any kind of inside local knowledge yet, so we're looking forward to getting some of that tonight. But we've just been walking around on site over a couple of days. We can tell that your park is really, it's been nicely done, and you've got a number of really beautifully established trees on the site, and we know very well that Hunters Hill is really known for its leafiness. These trees here, we would kind of mark out. This is not an arborist assessment. This is just our own visual assessment. That these trees would mark out as being really significant big trees. Number one is a fig tree, and we think it might be the only fig tree in Fig Tree Park, but you're here to tell me otherwise. There is another one. Okay. I was surprised if there was only one, so we'll need to pick your brains on that one. And at the moment, I have to say that one fig tree has got cars parked up against it. So one of the things that immediately sprang to our mind is that we need to make a little bit more fuss about that tree, about all the trees really, but we wouldn't want to propose something that was, a car park right up against it in that way for the future. The paths that exist around at the moment, just as an analysis to show how people move around the park, but also where the hard stand is, because whenever we're doing work, we're always looking for ways to avoid taking out any trees and to use. We basically say we're always looking for the scars in the landscape. We're always looking for the bits that have already been messed up, and we try to fix those bits. We don't go into any kind of pristine, new, green places that are doing their job well to provide good parkland for us. We look for the bits that need help, and that's where we go for our to place our building. So obviously, all the buildings are along Gladesville Road. Most of them are fairly old. Some of them are not any longer fit for purpose in terms of the Sydney Community Services. The heights of things around this site, because we know we're talking about a building that might be over 2,000 square metres and two big stories tall. It might appear like a 3-story building. We've got to look at what the context is, and we don't want to build a big building like that right in the context of a whole heap of tiny little cottages. So we're just looking at what the context is. Obviously on the corner we've got a 3-story building, and we've got some other 3-story buildings around. There's a few 2-story buildings, but then the light grey around individual houses, mostly at 1 story. So the other thing that you'll note about this context map is that a lot of the buildings are quite set back from the street in a kind of a typical way of a leafy suburb, that the front boundary is not where the house starts. However, when you get into the shopping strip, it's much more normal that the building is right up a hard line on the street. So we need to think about, in designing a library, how we place it on the site. We want it to be part of the shopping, civic sort of feel of that part of your area, or do we want it to acknowledge much more the suburban setback? These are the heritage items that we've picked up in the area. We've got some really significant sandstone walls across the road. I mean, Hunters Hill, you do have a lot of sandstone walls, so maybe you don't think they're so significant. I think they're really it's an extensive run of sandstone walling and a beautiful feature. Then we've got a number of other heritage listed items around, including the little sandstone house that's right next to Fig Tree. Almost feels a little bit like it's in Fig Tree Park, and I think it's got some architects in it maybe, but it's tenanted. Now, here again, this is just us providing our brains for fodder in working out what could happen on this site, right? So we can see, if you take this first big diagram, there's 3 blocks where you could put a building where no trees are. Now, that's the only criteria we used. No trees. Where can you put a building where you wouldn't have to take any trees out? And that shows these 3 blocks here, right, adding up to 3,400 square metres, way more than we need. And we're already talking about a 2-story building anyway. So if you think a 2-story building of about 2,500 square metres would have 1,250 in its footprint, then we play around with that. We take a 1,250 footprint, we place it 3 different ways. And I will tell you straight off that we do this We tried to deliberately do this without judgment. We just put it anywhere where that first map tells us we can put it, and then we make an assessment. Then we look at it and go, is this good or bad? So the first one, you can see that there's opportunities for the building that, we could, if we do this, we could have a much wider throat into Fig Tree Park. Fig Tree Park could come out to the street, and we could have much more green on the street there. We could potentially have an entry into this library building off a sort of a public plaza that was part of that park. That would be one of the advantages of that one. Some disadvantages are that it's quite a deep floor plate, so we might have to be clever about how we get light and air into the guts of that building. And there will be a few small trees probably around the edges here that might get lost. Then second one, if we take the approach of really, really protecting any tree at all, no matter whether it's a small bush or anything, gives us this one. So this option, we can set it back further off the street. We get a long north and south elevation, so we get plenty of good light and air. But the disadvantage to this one, I think the key one, is that connection which you've just made for Fig Tree, that wasn't there until quite recently, it still remains as narrow as it currently is, which is not bad. It's good, but there's not an opportunity to widen that with that one. And then the third one is to just take the first one and turn it around, and you can clearly see here that while we have a really, really wide connection to Fig Tree Park to Gladesville Road, we're impinging on the croquet lawn. So, we say that one has some disadvantages there. The other thing that we might think about this one is that there might be a bit of view loss for some of the houses or apartments, because these are some apartments here. So we've got to be careful about that too. So we go through this exercise, like I say, without judgment when we're doing it, because sometimes from an architect's point of view, and also from the point of view of community consultation, we do want to show you something that is not a good idea. We want to show you something bad so that we can get your reaction, and you can feel more comfortable about making your judgment about the ones that are better. So it's not to go into the science of it, but comparative evaluation is one of the ways that we know the decisions we're making are good ones. We compare all the other options. All right. Now, what I would like you to do for this workshop is you're going to talk with the other people on your table. You're going to have you've got all your little tags of all the possible uses. So if you see here, all of those uses that were on one of those early slides, and Georgia has cut them, but not cut them all the way through, so you have to rip them. Hang on for a sec. Now, I just want you to have a discussion amongst yourselves about what's in and what's out. And it's just a prompted discussion. We'll be taking photos of what you do so that we're collecting it as feedback. What's in, what's out, and add your own, because you do have a number of blanks. Okay? And then additionally, if you don't feel like doing that exercise, there's just a straight up questionnaire that you can fill in, and we'll come around. I stole you. Hi, everybody. Can we get everyone's attention? I do that primary school teacher thing and clap. Maybe. Thank you for the glass clanging people. Thank you very much. Wow, that actually happened really quickly. You're very well behaved. Okay. Well, I mark that as a success no matter what the results we get out of it, because there was so much chat going on. I mean, maybe we were just chatting about something else entirely, I don't know, but you seem to be really engaged with trying to work this out for us, and we really appreciate it. Now, Georgia is going to go around and take some photos of some of the things you've done. We need to keep a record of what you've written, so please don't disturb it or take it home with you. We need all of that work that you've done, so make sure you leave it for us. And yeah, don't be alarmed if Georgia's going around taking photos. Now, I've had a number of questions I can just answer straight up that were common questions. Same questions kept coming up, so I'll just answer some of those. One is about the process that we're doing here, and Nick or Annie can also answer this question, but we are doing this brief development, working out what the project needs to be, and then we will do a concept design, and we will put together in a report that shows all the research we've done, all the consultation we've done, and that report will be kind of the tool that the council will go to state and federal government for funding. So it's a process where no one is going to give you any money to build your library until you tell them what you need and what it's possibly going to look like. So the council has to invest this time and this money to get a report and the background information and a concept design, and it'll be costed by a quantity surveyor to work out an estimate how much money the council will actually be asking for from state and federal government. So that process that we're doing now, I think we're anticipating that we'll be wrapping it up in July. So we'll be back talking to you again before July to show you some of the ideas that we're generating out of your feedback. So then after that point, the council will have the tools they need to try and start applying for grants. So that was a question that a few of you asked about the process. Okay, can I? And that was a common question, so I'm just going to put that into the microphone so everyone can hear your question. One of the questions was, what happens to all the people who are currently using the site, the Croquet Club, all the other uses inside the Croquet Club and Sydney Community Services? And like Nick says, there's going to have to be a strategy to decant those uses temporarily so that they can still function as well as possible while the building goes on. But none of that would even start until we're starting to know when the demolition and construction would start. And that, I think your timeline is bang on, Nick, 3 or 4 years. It'll be an 18-month build, so we're at least 2 years out of doing any of that. Yep.
One aspect of this that you haven't explained is access and parking.
Yep.
So why is that not part of the scheme?
I think it's not part of it, and the general conversation that we've had so far is that whatever the footprint of the building, there would be underground parking underneath it. So we haven't had a discussion about what the quantum of parking we would get under there, but that has been the assumption that whatever the footprint is, there'll be underground parking under it. Parking is never adequate. Yeah. Yes, sir. Sir, with your hand up. Yep. That's exactly it. That's the LAP control.
That's something for us to bring back to you guys as options going forward. I'll put my hand on the heart today and say we're going to, 5 stories there because we'll make enough money. But sometimes you don't, because the uses may not really give you that income source that you need to build those extra 2 levels. So that's the whole thing we need to still analyse and get proper valuations on, rent reviews and things like that. It's quite a complex process. And just back to the relocation, we've worked with every group on relocation. We put a library into the Mandarin Shopping Centre for 4 years while we built the Consultation, and it worked very well and very successful. And we had other groups that we moved into other buildings. So we're sort of, we've got other buildings and we've got other places and we've got the yarn and we can do all sorts of things to help groups find places to reside while we come up with some actually purpose-built buildings that meet the needs of the community and our operators in those buildings. And I know that Brett here and she might want to say something about that.
Yes. Hello everyone, my name is Branka. I'm the CEO of Community Services. I can't say loud enough how we expect this project to actually happen. We have been working out of our buildings for a very long time. Some of them are close to not being usable for the purpose we need them to be usable for. Council has been fantastic to us. They are helping us make these buildings last as long as they can. But as many of you may not know, we have a day centre, someone's fallen and we have a community who has dementia, and we will have to leave these buildings within the next 6 months. So we already are working with the council on relocation. And we're more than happy to do that, and we have to do that. So we're definitely looking forward to this project, and we will work with you as a community, both the services and community, so that people who really need the services will continue to get them. We will not disappear. We will work from wherever we can, and we have a plan. So don't worry about services, don't worry about time. But we really want this project to happen.
Thanks, Bob. We did do a site tour of the Sydney Community Services buildings, and speaking from an architectural point of view, I cannot imagine how Branka and her team are doing what they do out of those buildings at the moment. It's really quite amazing. So we hope to provide something much better for them as quickly as possible. Okay, any other questions? Chris? Yep.
Could occur to our club during the period of the building could be quite damaging to us. That's one perspective. The other one is that our finances are quite tight. We depend on about a quarter of our income comes from the hires that we have, the hiring the hall. So if there were changes that occurred to the structure that ends up, we desperately need council to support us, and really we need council to make a commitment that they will support the club long term. That this is not something to be given away in the context of doing something else. So can we get that through the process in some way when the representations are made to council about the objectives for the project?
We certainly feel that within the process, and as you probably aware, not the last time we had many conversations with the process, and more than happy to do that over the next couple of months and do it as well. I think my numbers in the community, you just ring me when you need to talk to me.
Yep. Okay, anybody else got anything for me? Yes, sir, up the front here.
I think what we're trying to do is put a lot of services into a can of bigger area, and the trouble is that this has 100 little restrictions to it, and we've got to find our way around it. But it's no good building something that is just a little bit small for them and a little bit small for them and a little bit small for the others. So I think we have to have a good idea as to what we can do and where we can do relocation if that becomes necessary to get this.
And I think that's a really good point, and I'll try and repeat it a little bit for people in the back. And the point that you're making, which I think is a good one, is that we are trying to squeeze, at the moment the list I've given you is squeezing a lot of function and a lot of program onto that one site. That site does have a lot of constraints about it, especially if we want to keep, you know, the look and feel of it as it is. And what I'm understanding is that the point would be, it would be better to do a few things well than to try and squeeze everything in there and have everything just kind of 3/4 good. And I heartily, that's music to an architect's ears, I have to say. So.
Is there another possible location? If you're looking at this one place, are there no other possible locations?
That really would be a question for Annie and Nick, I'm afraid. I don't know at this stage. I've been asked to look at this site. If we get to the point over there being, you know, we're finding that this is not fit for purpose, that what the community wants really can't fit there, then I think that's exactly what the council will have to do for that function, or maybe just some of the functions. But I think, do you want to speak on that? Some people who have been involved in the project in a library.
I'm Anthony White. I worked on the initial proposal in 2019-20.
Do you want that?
No, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah.
And we spent months on this. So we worked with our tenants, which is the original reports, which I think apparently are accessible online. So we worked with Cameron from State Library and a group of us, and we worked our way through what's viable and where. So in order to get money from the State Library, you have to comply with criteria. So the criteria requires you to be accessible to transport within 400 to 500 metres. You have to have a street frontage, which we need to have. You have to provide community services, the whole criteria. Not many sites in Hunters Hill fulfil that criteria. That criteria comes with a couple of bonuses.
Yeah.
So a couple of those bonuses at the time we looked at this proposal was that we would get a series of grants from the state government. We are one of the few municipalities in New South Wales without a library. There are only two, and we are one of them. On
think that's really helpful to have that background. But I would only add to that is if you do have an idea of somewhere else you want us to look at, I'm happy to look at it. But it sounds like the work has been done, and I do think this is a good site. We are going to have to, huh? Oh, I don't know that, but if you ask us to look at it, we'll have a look at it. But I think the point being more that we have to respect this, that if it's going on that site, we have to respect that site, and perhaps we shouldn't ask it to do too much. It'd be on Gladesville Road. Oh, I don't know. I haven't got that far. Okay, if anyone's got any more questions, otherwise, I think we can wrap it up, and but please don't disturb your tables. Take photos, and we'll take photos. And I really do appreciate you all coming here tonight, so thank you very, very much. Thanks.